Good evening, councillors, and welcome to the first meeting of our committee here, Community, Environment and Partnership. Firstly, I am a new chair to you. I have got experience of being a chair in many years, about 40, so I'm not totally new to chairmanship, but I would bear with me, please, while we're getting ourselves used to the new regime. As I said at the beginning, I do have glasses for distance, but I could just about make you out, but I can't see your names, and I apologise if I do get you wrong, so please forgive me for that. Just a reminder that obviously as a member of the Standards Committee, I would hope that you all respect all the rules and regulations and that people will abide by the Nolan principles as you've all signed the Code of Conduct. So just a reminder that we're all here for the same reason, to move forward. And I would ask you that when you speak clearly so that everybody can hear, especially those people in the public on webcam, and that when you're called that you actually try not to repeat yourselves so that we can all perhaps go home and enjoy the weather this evening, because it's a bit shorter agenda than we may have expected. Okay. First item is that we have no members of the public here this evening by looks of things, unless nobody is asked to speak. But we have got apologies for absence and substitution, and Councillor Carr has given his apologies and has been replaced by Councillor Isaac, who's sitting in the seat. Has anyone got any other information about anyone who has not arrived? No? Okay, it's fine. So the first item on the agenda is item 2, which is the appointment of a vice chair. To appoint the Vice Chair of the Community, Environment and Partnership Committee for the year 23-24 municipal year, and I would seek nominations, please. Anyone like to nominate somebody? Sorry. Councillor Bowe.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to nominate Councillor Compton Burnett to be the Vice Chair of the CEP Committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bowe. Yes.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to nominate Councillor Alex Lee.
Thank you. Any other nominations? Okay, thank you.
Chair, I'm sort of slightly puzzled that there might be a nomination for the Labour group because they are effectively supporting the administration, and therefore it seems to be quite difficult to see how they could provide the sort of alternative view that one might want to see coming from the vice chair. He or she should, under the Constitution, be non-administration.
Councillor Isaac, your previous committee chair was, I believe, Councillor Golding, and she was part of the administration.
My vice chair was a Liberal Democrat, Councillor Mackay.
And I would confirm that, as you know, the Labour group aren't actually part of the administration. The administration is Liberal Democrat and the Independence Forum. So that is perfectly okay. And the nomination stands. Therefore, I think we need to vote unless there are any other nominations. Can those in favour of Councillor Compton Bennett first, please show. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And those in favour of Councillor Lee, please show. And that will be 6, yeah? 7. Thank you. So Councillor Alex Lee is Vice Chair of this committee. Thank you, Alex. You stay there. In the future, it's helpful to have the Vice Chair maybe can operate the. Okay. Shall we now move on then? Are there any declarations of interest anyone has for these items on the agenda? No? Okay. There are no urgent matters. I'm not aware of any urgent matters. The next item is the minutes of the meeting held on the 15th of March, 2023, which have been circulated. The committee obviously can only agree that meeting held was accurate record. I will move that the minutes are accepted and signed as a correct record. Thank you. Everyone in favour of that, please show. Okay, thank you. Anyone against? No, thank you. Thank you. Okay, item 6, therefore, is the Tree Appeal Single Issue Panel, and this is to appoint 5 members and 2 reserves to the panel, which I believe has been sitting for a number of years. The current membership is Councillor Tomlin, who is here, Councillor Hussey, Robinson, Freeman, and 1 vacancy with someone who's no longer on the council, and Councillor Tustain and Councillor Court were reserve members. To date, we have received nominations from Councillor Court, Councillor Robinson, Councillor Hussey, and Councillor Tomlin, I believe. Are there any other people who would wish to be nominated? Yes.
Can I nominate myself? I wasn't actually sure coming into the meeting, but yeah, lovely. I'd like to nominate myself then.
Any other nominations? I might also nominate myself because I'm quite interested in trees and we have got a lot in my ward. But that might be me too many, so that's fine. I'll defer. Sorry. Everyone happy to accept the nomination?
I don't think we've got any members from the Labour group.
Okay.
We'll just check in with Councillor Tustain if she wants to stay. I think that she would reserve.
Well, as a reserve?
If not, we can go back to what
Yeah,
the leaders are.
well, we'll go back. It doesn't have to be totally cross-party, I understand. This is a group that looks at the panel, but it would be helpful to have someone from all the groups. Okay, thank you. We'll go back to Councillor Tustain and see if she wants to remain, perhaps as a reserve then. Okay, right, now at this point I need to advise the committee that we wish to amend the order of the business and that we will now take item 9 and obviously you've all received an email or should have received an email about the item which I will read the advice that you were given this morning on an email or yesterday. At the request of the cabinet member, I as chair have agreed to propose that the community centre paper be deferred and that it will instead be brought back to CEP at a later date to allow the new administration to receive a full debrief which may result in revisions to some areas and enable the cabinet member to be in attendance. I would like to move that we do in fact defer this item. I would ask for a seconder, please. Seconded. Does everyone agree? Thank you. Did somebody wish to speak? Sorry, Councillor Isaac.
Yes, Chair. Sorry, but could I, through you as Chair, express some disappointment that this paper has been pulled with 24 hours to go before the meeting. Some of us have spent, I imagine, quite a bit of time reading through the report, and so it is disappointing that that this has happened. And I think the other point I would make, and maybe Councillor Phillimore might support me on this, is that the need to renew the leases of many of these community centres is something that needs to be dealt with urgently. We've got a lot of communities that can't move forward with their community buildings because the leases need to be renewed, and therefore it seems to me that it's a disappointing failure that we're now going to push this back, presumably some months, before we can look at this again as a committee.
I understand your frustration, Councillor Isaac. I know that you've made some comments on the paper from your local experience. However, it has been pulled, and we will bring it back by September at the very latest. I would hope it would come back before then, if the work can be done. But I assure you that it's still a priority, and we're still going to be working on it. And many people that have already read the paper said there was an awful lot to be said about it. So I think, you know, it's not a matter of pulling it totally, just a matter of making sure that it is actually what the current administration wants to move forward with. So please bear with us. I know it's frustrating, but that's where we are. Would people like to now show their support? Sorry?
There's a dangerous presumption that I would support this paper. That's a dangerous presumption. The previous administration have let these leases run out. Some of them are over 2 years and more that have run out. So we had plenty of time to renew those leases under the previous administration. So I would like some more information on this paper. And certainly, I don't know about anybody else's agendas, but we didn't get the Appendix 1 to tell us which community centres these were, so I take it these are on pink. So I would like a lot more information on this.
Thank you, Councillor Fillimore. Yes, I appreciate that. So it has been moved and seconded that we actually defer item 9 to a future meeting. All those in favour, please show. All those against? Abstained? Okay. That is carried. We move back to the agenda. Councillor Golding.
Sorry, Councillor Lee's just completely proven my question wrong. I was just wondering if it would be worth Councillor Lee moving, just because the best, having had a vice chair, the best thing Councillor Mackay could do for me was sit next to me and point at me when the people were waving at me, because it's really, there's so much to
Thank you for your
concentrate
helpful suggestion. Move Councillor Lee's name. He can be. He can swap. Yeah. So we now move on, and if people didn't want to stay on webcam because that item has now been moved, obviously they can leave, but I hope they found that there are other things much more interesting coming up. So we've now got an annual update of the climate change strategy, and it's going to be introduced by Councillor Tomlin, who is the new portfolio holder, I understand. Councillor Tomlin.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. Yes, indeed, it's been 4 or 5 weeks of intense information gathering. It's been quite exciting to meet the teams, and tonight we're going to receive a slide presentation of an update of where we are with the climate change work from Mark Lambert and Sam Taylor. They would like to take questions at the end. I'm going to pop in with a slide partway through, and really what I can say is I think I've asked them to share some good news, the good news from all the work they've been doing previously going forward, and I'm going to add another gear, and I'll talk to you about that. So we're going to up our efforts and rejoice in some of the good news we can tell you about tonight. Thank you.
Evening all. So I'll just start us off quickly, run us through what we're going to talk about. So very quickly a recap for some new members around the kind of declaration and the strategy. I'm going to talk about progress since the last update, so when we came to committee last autumn. I'm going to hand over to Mark to talk about kind of current proposed work areas and kind of future engagement with the committee. So just by way of background, and very happy to field questions from new members of the committee offline, take questions away if people have specific questions around content of the strategy. Don't want to waste too much time this evening, but as I'm sure you're familiar, the climate emergency was unanimously declared back in 2019. with the key aspirations for the council to be carbon neutral in our own operations by 2025, end of 2025, and working towards a carbon neutral borough by 2030. And we have a climate change and air quality strategy that was adopted in March 2021, which sets out how we aim to deliver that. A number of kind of principles and categories, and then alongside that we have a kind of action plan which goes through in a bit more detail the things we're actually looking to do. So I'm very happy to discuss, share that with members who are less familiar with the background if needs be. Very quickly then, we report our council emissions on a financial year basis, and just by way of update for the council emissions for the financial year up to 2023, end of March 2023. The first headline is that it's overall good news, although we still only have indicative results. We're waiting for data from our waste contract that is a significant proportion actually of our fleet. So until we have that data, it's really difficult to say for certain what our end position will be. However, the other things that we report on have all seen a reduction compared to last year. The year before that was a real low because of COVID, and as you mentioned, a bit of bounce back, but lots of positive news. Primarily, the key areas of reduction. One is a consolidation of our office footprint, so vacating the Parklands building. Eliminating red diesel, which we used in a number of our operational vehicles, particularly mowers, some of the large ones. We've replaced that with an alternative fuel, and that trial has been really successful and resulted in quite significant savings. And a reduction in usage, particularly of gas, in our leisure facilities. It's worth noting that we've included emissions from home working of staff for the first time this year, and emissions from water being quite a minor addition, but home working emissions actually quite significant. So as ever, always trying to include and be more robust in that reporting. There'll be a much more detailed breakdown in our autumn update, talks about where these emissions will come from, but just a quick headline. Then kind of what have we been doing since we came to committee last? I wanted to highlight a few of the things that are going on in a number of categories. So we'll canter through these, as I said, questions at the end. Very happy to field those. Firstly, electric vehicle charging, a key area of focus to facilitate that transition to low carbon transport. We've been working for a while on a bid with Hampshire County Council for on-street charging, and that bid's been finalised for submission, awaiting an updated application process from government. We've also replaced a number of chargers, particularly in the Feathers Yard, which is a charging hub in the town centre, a new rapid charger there, a number of charge points imminently going out in community centre locations, as well as the recent addition of a charger in the council courtyard you may have seen. Building on this, we've been obviously reducing emissions from our own fleet. We've had some new vehicles added to the fleet specifically. So the dog warden van, a very popular service in the council, and now has an electric van as well. And this alternative fuel, so HVO, stands for hydrogenated vegetable oil, kind of waste biofuel. That successful trial with mowers has been extended to a number of other operational vehicles, and we're looking to include more vehicles where perhaps electric or other low carbon alternatives don't really exist readily yet. Looking at our operational property, we've just commissioned some energy audits of our community facilities, so building on the agenda item that has been discussed earlier. So adding to audits we've already had done on our operational buildings, looking at what measures could be done there to reduce those emissions and improve energy efficiency. And based on our own buildings, we've got in our kind of schedule of works identified, initially looking at quick wins where there's simple measures we can do in our buildings, preparing a longer term programme of works for our operational buildings. We operate a number of grant schemes to improve energy efficiency across the borough. Primarily, these are part of a consortium of councils in the area using government funding. We continue to target that, and as of recent data, over £600,000 has been spent on these government schemes in improving energy efficiency of particularly low income and kind of poorly efficient houses at the moment. As ever, we're really trying to ensure all this information is as readily accessible for residents as possible. It's a bit of a minefield to navigate the support that is out there. We're always looking to try and improve the accessibility of that information, and a number of other initiatives that we'll talk about will hopefully support that. Businesses are another area that we're really keen to support to take action, and there's a lot of challenges with reaching businesses. We've got a couple of schemes. The first one is a small SME, so small and medium enterprises, so a trial with these small businesses. We've partnered with an organisation called Climate Essentials to offer a platform and one-to-one support for a handful of businesses. It helps them understand their existing carbon footprint and then identify actions that they can take moving forward to reduce that. We're particularly looking at developing case studies and other examples that we can share with other businesses. We've also had a programme called Locase, which is a grant scheme for businesses. That's just coming to an end at the end of the month, essentially, but has been able to offer match funding for companies to make energy efficiency improvements. We are kind of always trying to increase and grow our engagement with residents and communities. So a kind of big initiative that was previously launched is it's been known as the Green Team. Hopefully people are familiar with it. Mark will touch on a bit more about that in a minute, but that team has been designed to offer particularly energy and energy efficiency advice to residents, communities, small businesses, among other things. Happy to say that we've been successful in recruiting the vast majority of that team. 5 out of the 6 roles that were created and approved by council at the budget meeting, with a view to starting later in summer. We've also been interacting a lot with kind of parish and town councils, trying to engage and support the work that they're already doing, if they are, or encourage action that they could take. We've held a number of workshops earlier this year in tandem with BVA, Basingstoke Voluntary Action. We support a group, kind of independent groups, the Basingstoke Area Sustainability Group, again of enthusiastic and engaged parish councillors and community groups, helping them share ideas with each other, share ideas that we're part of, again ensuring that no one's kind of reinventing the wheel and there's a lot of material out there. And another kind of big item that happened since October was something called Sustainable Basingstoke. There's a cup on show here on the table, but this is a new identity, a new brand for the council's launched to be a more informal way to engage with residents and communities. It has a new website, a new newsletter and Facebook page at the moment. That launched earlier this year. At the moment, we're in a process of brand building, I think to use the comms term, trying to increase our reach, get in front of more residents, sign up to the newsletter. There's a vehicle for us to share kind of tips and advice on how to be more sustainable, and also run a number of campaigns as part of that. So we're in the process of running a kind of walking and cycling campaign called Walk This Way, encouraging residents to get around without necessarily need to drive to local or easily accessible places, as well as launching a number of initiatives like a Sustainable Cups, reusable cup programme. Around kind of zero carbon electricity, we undertook a study on capacity or potential for solar PV on rooftops in the borough, commercial rooftops or non-domestic rooftops generally. That yielded a few things that yielded a kind of overall potential that we can use in kind of understanding what that looks like, but also individual reports on a kind of building by building, business by business basis. We've been looking to utilise that data to reach out to and engage particularly the highest potential businesses, signpost them to where they might get support, look to proceed with an installation as a way to kind of overcome that first hurdle of, is it worth it for me? And then finally, we've just basically completed a study that was looking at the carbon sequestration on our land. When we produced the climate change and air quality strategy, part of that looked at, well, what's the carbon sequestration, the carbon absorbing impact of our own council land. this study, which is just kind of the final I's being dotted and T's being crossed. I've been reviewing that and what the opportunities are to improve that on our own council land, with kind of limitations around other uses. Pitches are going to stay as football pitches, for example, but what is the opportunity around that to improve it? And we've also purchased the first offsetting credits that we would discuss as well, committee. So I'll hand over to Mark now.
Great, thanks, Sam. I'm Mark Lambert. I'm the Climate Change and Sustainability Manager. And I'll just talk you through the current and proposed work moving forward before Councillor Tomlin says a few words. As Sam mentioned, we've now successfully recruited to the Green Team. To give you a bit of flavour, the Green Team is very much going to be community focused, engaging with residents, helping to signpost them to grant opportunities, covering all manner of things linked to sustainability, so transport and travel, recycling, carbon reduction, energy saving money on bills, that kind of thing. So we very much see them engaging with communities, working with ward members and parish councils to really get to the grassroots level. So any support you can afford down the line would be really much appreciated, and we'll engage with members again as the team becomes established. As Sam mentioned, we are looking for them to arrive in early to mid-July, subject to some recruitment admin we need to go through, but we'll inform you when they arrive more formally. Green Week, some of you may have seen the details about Green Week. It launched last Saturday with the Green Fair in Basingstoke Town Centre, and it runs until next weekend. There's still a number of events to take place, including an EV car fair in the town centre on Friday, and some upcycling and cafe repair type things happening. There's a full programme of events, so if you'd like to see details, we can happily share them with you. Sam mentioned some of the work we're undertaking with businesses. We currently support the Sustainable Business Network, which runs across the borough and into other parts of North Hampshire, which affords the opportunity to share good practice with businesses and for them to support one another. Sam mentioned the feedback on the SME trial. This is effectively supporting 10 to 12 businesses in the borough with a year's worth of support. It enables them to understand what their carbon footprint might be, to audit their operations, and to really detail a roadmap to reducing their carbon. So we very much welcome the involvement of those companies and organisations, and this will allow us to share that best practice with others in the borough. We had a resident survey as a borough council that gives earlier this year. We're looking to build on that to delve down to the next level of detail and understand more about how we can support our communities. And in that respect, we're looking to understand our communities in much more detail, to understand how we can best work with them. I know Sam Charlton's next on the agenda with an item around community profiles. So I think this is an example of how we can start to engage and tap into communities and understand the needs in a bit more detail. Sam also mentioned the work we do with some community groups and parishes, and we're seeking to grow that. It's currently around 15 groups that are supported, and this allows them to come together and support one another to develop ideas and share best practice. I'm sure some of you are involved in community groups at a parish or local level. Sam also mentioned some of the community grants that are available. The details of those are on our website, and I think it's very much going to be the role of the Green Team to share the news of these with communities and to signpost them and handhold residents through that process. There's a recognition that we need to work really closely with our housing associations, and we've started to engage with them at a detailed level now so that we can ensure the Green Team work alongside the teams that they have in place. Members that used to sit on the Members Advisory Panel received an update from the two housing associations back in October, where they talked through their aspirations for improving their stock and how they can support their own residents in moving to reduce carbon emissions and save money. We're very aware of the need to support the supply chain in terms of things like fitting low heat pumps in the borough, so we're talking to BCOT around how we can support them to improve their offer down the line. And as Sam mentioned, we've got the alternative fuel trial for many of our ops fleets, and we're looking to expand that. We've recently started, I think it was back in May, the rollout of those to the sweepers in the borough. So there's 6 sweepers now operating on HVO, which is a good news item as well. We're keen to trial electric vehicles as soon as they become available, particularly for the ops fleet. I think that the car fleet is becoming well established, and we know what we're dealing with in that sense. But the bigger vehicles are a bit of an unknown quantity in terms of their range and capacity. So we're keen to trial those when they become available to make sure that they meet our requirements. And there's a proposal for a new electric car club in the town, which we're beginning to scope out to support residents without access to a car who may not have or may not be very familiar with electric cars at present. Sam mentioned the rollout of EV charging fleet, EV chargers, and we're keen to continue that, particularly in the council-owned car parks and community centres. We're looking to establish effectively a mini hub at Upper Parklands car park on the campus to support car charging for staff vehicles, for visitors, and for the fleet of vehicles that we operate within the Borough Council. We need to make that more of a readily available facility. We've begun to scope out the potential for carbon sequestration schemes in the borough to see whether that can benefit carbon removal more locally. It's at the very early stages, but that's something that we're keen to investigate in further detail. And as Sam mentioned, we are looking at our property portfolio to see how we can support a long-term programme to invest in our community facilities. There's a budget in place of £500,000 for the next few years to improve the portfolio, and energy audits have been undertaken on a number of these. To support the Smarter Ways of Working programme that was introduced a year or so back, there's a council travel plan update that's underway, such that we can support staff to travel in more effective and carbon-friendly ways. So that's something that we'll be rolling out with staff for the next 6 to 8 months. And we've been talking to our procurement team around the contracts, such that when we buy goods or services, that we do that in the most effective way, and that takes into account carbon and environmental credentials, such that this becomes kind of more mainstreamed in our everyday activity. We're also looking to understand the scope of the emissions for the suppliers that work with us, such that when we buy goods and services, the emissions that they produce can be taken into account as well. It's a relatively new process that we're looking at there. Councillor Tomlin, just a few of your ideas and suggestions.
Thank you, Mark. So, things to look at for the future. Right now, obviously, community halls and such like are suffering with energy costs. Now's the time to start to help them. We've had the reports. I was referred to the ABSOLA report that looked at businesses and community centres that we own and we don't own around the borough. And it's time that we're commissioning to see with properties, what property services, if the building can take it and how much it will cost, and we'll start to put a model together to try and really help those people or those communities, and also start to roll this out with businesses. I mean, there's upwards of 10%, I think, of our complete energy consumption is available on the roofs that we have some control over. So we shouldn't be sitting down. We need to be really proactive now, because we've got less than 7 years on our declaration. 7 years doesn't take very long. So we've really got to start motoring. And as an aside with that, continuously we've got to strive to get our developers of all the houses, the new houses that are coming into this borough, as to why they will not make zero carbon houses and help us beat these targets. There are places we have some control, and at the moment our local plan policies and building regs are obviously dictated by what's in the plan, but by government. So in our local plan coming forward, we've got to push for the requirements that we want to see in this borough, and we've got to challenge to find out how far we can go and why other councils that we know of have gone far and have been allowed to do it. So there's no reason why we shouldn't. So that's a target, is to find out how far we can push this, because again, we are going to get loads of, well, you can see what with the local plan and the number of houses, all those houses will have to be upgraded, which is complete nonsense when we've got so many in our regeneration programs with our partners in the social housing and their task to upgrade houses. A lot of our stock I mean, you can virtually put your hand through the walls. I mean, it's in terrible state. So we've got to work with developers and trying to get this forward. And again, with our major projects, to get the town centre. I mean, a great thing I've been trying to do for years, and everybody's doing it around the country, so why not us, is putting effectively bike shed roofs over car parks. It's a no-brainer. I mean, you know, that's just where we're going to put our electric car charging points, and we could actually do a favour and keep people dry while they do their shopping, but also generate electricity at the same time. So those things have got to be explored. And then, you know, all our projects, Basing View, the leisure centre, there's no reason why we should not be in control of it. It is money. We have to find out how we can afford it, but we're going to have to afford it because no one's going to afford it for us unless we can get them to understand the seriousness of the future generations and our carbon usage. It's got to be done, and that goes along with lots of other things in refuse, but that's another day. So that's where we are, and I'd like to thank the team. They're very keen. We're getting bigger. We've got the green team. We've got the Basingstoke Green Week. So we're getting a lot more engagement, and we're going to strive for more and more, and we've got to start delivering more and more visible things. So thank the team. Thank you for your time. If there's any questions, please fire away.
Councillors, yes, we've now got a few minutes to ask our officers any questions that's arisen. So if you could put your hand up, and between us we'll try and choose people. Who is first? Councillor Howard Sorrell.
Thank you. I've made a couple of notes throughout all of that. One of them is quite small, so I'll start with that one. Are we taking into account the travel of councillors to and from council meetings when you're looking at the impact of the council itself? Purely because I'm quite a big advocate for remote work, and obviously during COVID we were able to do meetings remotely, then the government didn't renew that legislation. So if we're recording that, it's one small but maybe significant piece of the puzzle when we're talking to central government to try and advocate for a return to the ability to work remotely as councillors.
Yes, is a simple answer. Yes, councillor mileage is included in our footprint.
Perfect, thank you. And then the slightly chunkier one, but I think Chris touched on it towards the end, so I might not get an answer here. You talked about when we're purchasing goods and services, but what about when we're providing services? Have we looked at, or are we going to look at going forward, better recycling for the borough? And importantly, have we considered reducing bin collections from weekly to bi-weekly? Because that would have a huge impact on both recycling rates and on the ability to reduce the carbon footprint of the teams going around collecting bins.
The answer to that is yes. Government legislation is being worked up at the moment, which will see, I suppose, the aim is the standardisation of waste recycling throughout the country. As you understand that it's different in every area. It's going to be standardised. However, we've got a little way to go. There's a lot of negotiation. We collect the waste, as you know, and then Hampshire dispose of it. So we're working with that. It's part of another team, so it wasn't necessarily with these guys to report. And I'm sure we will bring this to the committee when there's more news. But there's a clear vision that I think people will be happy with, which will have a big knock-on effect on waste in the coming years, I think, hopefully quicker.
Thank you. Can I just ask a question before we go to the next speaker? Will you circulate your slides to everyone, please? Thank you, because I know people have been trying to write notes and listen at the same time. It's quite difficult. Thank you. I'll call Councillor Phillimore.
Thanks, Chair. Not necessarily for Sam or Mark, but perhaps for you as cabinet member, and it might not even be for CEP, but it's worth airing. Is if we are serious about climate change, why are we allowing developers to offset nitrates in their planning applications, especially in sensitive testinage in catchment areas?
Do you refer to the scheme in Eastleigh or that type of thing, the offset, or just offset generally?
Yeah, offset generally.
Well, it is a
I don't think that was controlled by government, and that's not controlled by us.
the offsetting is again with natural, I believe Natural England. They've come up with the figures and the calculations, but the actual particular offset, if it is in our local area, as in Eastleigh, was a cabinet decision back in earlier to allow that to happen. It was offered, but I think it's something that I am challenging with our biodiversity team on that side rather than the climate team. It's all very interlinked, but we are looking at it, absolutely.
Thank you.
More than happy to come back with a written answer as well. We can speak to colleagues who are closer to that kind of particular issue if that's helpful to you as well.
Are you happy with that? Happy with that, Councillor Finn? Yeah, okay, thank you. You'll come back with that. Thank you. And the next person is Councillor Bowe.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for a very interesting presentation. I think, you know, the team is to be congratulated on making a lot of progress in this area, which is fantastic. I would like to just draw out a little bit more information, if possible, about the reference to housing associations and the work that the borough is doing with them. In particular, I'm interested in the dilemma about heating housing association properties, particularly as a lot of them have got ancient heating systems anyway. And we all seem to be grappling with how can we effectively replace gas boilers, retrofitting, as I believe the way it's described. I just wondered if you could tell us a little bit more about your discussions in that area. Thank you.
Apologies, I'll start again. Thank you for the question. Yes, we had some discussions with members back in October when they attended the members advisory panel. There was representatives there from the two main local housing associations who talked through their programme of improvements, not in any great detail in terms of particular areas, but I think there's a recognition across the board that they understand their stock in some detail and are working on an investment programme to improve their stock such that it can benefit residents from reduced heating bills in the future and improved environments in which to live. More recently, we've been talking to officers from Vivid and Sovereign around their plans in a bit more detail so that we can begin to get to the fine-grained detail of what their plans are. At this stage, I'm not able to share those with you because I don't have the exact specification and detail of that, but I think it's something we'd like to work on with them such that we can give you that kind of information down the line.
Could I do a quick follow-up, please, Chair, just to ask if in your next report you might be able to give us a little bit more detail in that area? I mean, if you don't have the information, obviously you can't, but it would be really, really interesting for us to know a bit more. Thank you.
We can certainly ask that question, yeah.
Thank you. And then the next person is Councillor Golding, please.
Thank you, Chair. Can I start with asking a quick follow-up question for Councillor Howard-Sorrell? How do you calculate councillor mileage? Do you just do it on what we claim? Because I suspect not all of us claim our mileage.
I think yes, it's a simple answer. So the data that we collect here is around claims. Like everything, we can only go on the data that we've got, and I guess as I touched on, we're always trying to refine that. Things like water is a good example where we've now got all right data. I guess in the grand scheme of things, the councillor mileage is immaterial as a kind of total percentage. So a little bit here and there isn't going to make a massive difference. But yeah, the more we can include, the better that data is. Yeah, that's a long-winded answer to say yes. That's what we claim it on. Yeah.
Interesting. So my question is: it's a bit unfortunate that you've come at the same time as the next item, because you're really missing from that, which is a bit disappointing to see. And I know you've mentioned it already, but it would be lovely to see in the profiles, like kind of some of the green infrastructure. So even if it's just a link to kind of car charging points in that community, or like, oh no, some of my communities have some real keen little interest groups that are really focused on green and might cut across some boundaries. But I think it would be lovely to see that there. And I know when back in the day when I were on cabinet, we were really keen to kind of have that green thread running through everything. So my suggestion to the chair is that when you see papers that suggest that it will be naturally carbon neutral, you question why it can't make carbon better rather than just neutral.
Thank you for the question. It's an interesting debate because clearly this particular portfolio does look at our ecological emergency, so all our biodiversity. The two are incredibly interlinked, and I'm conscious that we're reporting sort of one half and not both, because there's an awful lot I'd love to tell you about the other lot, but it's not on our agenda, and I think they've got plenty more to get on with, so I wouldn't rabbit on about it. But rest assured, there is a strong link coming through this, and the way we're set at the moment is that and you will know this, that the teams are across the disciplines, and there are experts in other teams. So it's a question of getting all our ducks in a row, if you like, because it's not a challenge at all, because we're in control of who's there. But we've got lots of reports, lots of things, and it's my role now to try and integrate what one half is doing that the other half knows, and that we actually bring that all together. Because we talked on carbon sequestration, I can't say it, that word anyway, sequestration, right? We would love to, if we could, increase the wetlands around the Loddon, for example. But we don't own the land, but we've got to look how far we can push it. We could take some of the carbon and put it in there, because the wetlands are a wonderful thing for taking carbon as a carbon sink. So it is all of that. But at the moment, we're not two different teams. We're two different sides. I'm not really a footballer, I wouldn't know. But anyway, we're two packs, if you like. So we're coming together, and we meet together, which is encouraging. So we actually, I hope you guys benefit, because the teams see what each other is doing or are doing, and it's early days, but that's where we're going. We're bringing it as one. Thank you.
I was just going to quickly add, because I think it's a really useful point. I guess we've been talking to Sam a little bit about the usefulness of what she's already done, and how I guess we can use that, for example, for the green team to tap into what's already happening, but likewise add into that to know exactly what's going on. So we've kind of started having that conversation, I guess, probably subject to when you discuss it, the next agenda item around how how it goes forward. But yeah, I think certainly we're really keen to make sure we're joined up as best we can be.
Thank you. Are you happy, Councillor Gordon? Okay, and Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Chair. This is more of a question for Mark. You mentioned around the sweepers and some of the council vehicles, they're currently on HVO, but that you're interested in moving to electric vehicles when they become available. Is it that the vehicles just aren't in existence, or is it that we're waiting for kind of end of life of the current vehicles before we move to electric? Is it an expense thing? Just wondering if we could move that quicker.
I think the answer is probably both the points you've raised, really. I think we've got some vehicles that aren't life expired, so there's no point in getting rid of those while they're still functioning and doing what they need to do. But equally, in some cases, there are some gaps in the market, perhaps where EVs aren't quite there yet and don't perhaps fill our full operational needs. Looking at Tom as the person that looks after the service, but I think that's generally the case, isn't it, in terms of our operational fleet?
Yep, exactly on. So we are constantly reviewing what's available on the market. So the team have trials of electric vehicles as they come out. We took delivery of an electric vehicle today for the operations team, which is kind of similar to a Bolingo-sized vehicle van, and they're generally quite available and they have a good range. It's the larger vehicles, tippers, that really don't exist at the moment on the market. But yeah, we're constantly reviewing that and looking for opportunities. Thank you.
Isaac, next, please.
Thank you, Chair. It's good to hear some very good work being done, some very good initiatives by officers, but I suppose I'm reminded of the fact that we have two very challenging objectives, two challenging deadlines of 2025 for net carbon zero for the borough council and 2030 for the borough as a whole. And I suppose that what would be helpful perhaps in the future would be, because it's all about how things are, how we're measuring progress. It would be nice, it would be good to have some quantitative, total quantitative evidence of how things are moving and what progress we're making with both those two objectives in terms of getting to the target of net carbon zero.
Thank you. Those are good points and something we can work on for the next update, which is scheduled in for November. So happy to bring that back to you.
Thank you, Chair. We are talking about net zero. Where are we with potentially looking beyond that to a net negative? As a borough, obviously as a council there's not much point because there's very little we can do in the grand scheme of things, but as a borough we're quite a large piece of land overall. I'm sure there's plenty of carbon that could be sucked out of the air beyond just getting us to net zero.
Thank you for the question. Yeah, great. It's a great ambition, and obviously I share that. However, it's a question of running before one walks, but without you've still got to know that you can run, and we can run, but we need a lot of help because there's an awful lot of things we're not in control of, being realistic. Obviously, the council thing, we have graphs, and I apologise we've not put the graph up, but the trajectory shows 2025 should be achievable. But I say we are waiting on data from quite some important players, but I understand that is happening. This is Serco, we're waiting for a little bit of info. But our housing associations, if we're looking, the cost of energy, the insulation of the house before you start pumping in your heat pumps and everything, it's no good putting in heating like that when you're just wasting it. The fabric of the building, so it's fabric first. We are building new homes, as I said, disappointingly they're not doing the carbon zero, but the insulation is better. There are there's a sense that the 2025 warmer homes, or the government initiative, let's hope it actually does happen, will make builders do things better, but it's not fast enough across the country. I want to try and put that in place in our local plan. So the challenges then become one of, are we going to be acting unlawfully by demanding something, or will it actually meet an inspector who would turn our local plan over because we were actually asking for too much that we're not allowed to? It's absolutely crazy and very frustrating, but we're going to keep going until we get turned back, because we are not building the houses currently, so we're not in a position to make that happen. We can only, I suppose, beg and plead with our builders, but sadly it's a business to them. It's quite disappointing, some of the conversations. It's who's going to jump first, and we're obviously faced with some economic challenges at the moment which aren't helping. But no, the target is to get positive carbon, positive energy. We can contribute something rather than we could make stuff. Now, the sort of questions we'll have to ask is we might have to see wind turbines. Now that put a shudder through some people, but maybe we have to face and bite the bullet. Maybe this borough needs them. Maybe that's a way we can help. It's not just solar panels. It's all those sort of things. If we want to actually generate the power, if we're not going to be able to sort of tear the place down and rebuild it, which it's a big ask. So, we've got to look at it carefully and see what we can do. But, we'll give it a go. Thank you.
Thank you, councillors. I think there's anyone else with a hand up, so I think we've allowed 15 minutes or so for questions, and the officers have said that if you've got any further questions, please send them to them, things you might thought of tomorrow when you get the slides. Please think, they'd be happy to answer. And I'd like to thank you all for coming this evening. I've given a very interesting presentation. I may have asked a lot more questions. I know I asked a lot yesterday, so I've kept quiet today. But obviously we will have questions and it'll be interesting. And thank you, Councillor Tomlin, for coming and giving us your view as well. So thank you this evening. And thank you all. And now we're going to sort of swap over officers, so just bear with us a moment while we move on. Because we turned it on because it was quite warm in here and now it's a bit chilly. Thank you. Happy medium, isn't it? So. Can we move on to the next item, which is item 8, which is community profiles, and this will be introduced by Councillor Mackay.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, everybody. Firstly, let me thank Sam and their team for the work in putting together the paper and the attached examples that we're here to consider this evening, which I think are excellent food for thought and should set us up nicely for some discussion. I'm very keen to come to this meeting with an open mind and hear your views on community profiles and how they might help our communities develop and be strengthened. And I invite you in the discussion to balance the work that officers will need to put in to build and maintain these living documents and consider how they'll help our partners and our communities and to help themselves. So I think we've got a couple of things already that have teed things up nicely. Councillor Golding made a comment in the previous section as to how the profiles could have something more than the first examples have got. And I thank Councillor Isaac for providing some extra information from his ward in advance of the meeting. So I'm looking forward to hearing the discussion and just hand over to Sam to introduce them and talk us through the paper. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor, and good evening, everyone. I'm Sam Charlton, and I'm the Community Wellbeing Manager. I'm just going to give a really brief overview of what the report is about and what we're seeking to do. And then, as Councillor Mackay says, what we want to do is to hear your thoughts and views on how we move this forward, and anything that you think needs to be included in these profiles if we move forward with them. So just to give a bit of an overview, the report seeks to summarise a revised approach to collating information about place-based communities. What we're trying to do is focus on the strengths that are within communities. We have got such a wide range of communities across the borough, and they vary significantly. They all have the different strengths, and there's a huge amount already happening within communities to help respond to the variety of needs that exist in place-based communities. So we've already got ward profiles, which are provided across the borough. They've just literally been updated by the policy team, and they're in the process of going through the final checks before they'll be available on the website, and that's from the 2021 census data. So what we intend to do is to complement what already exists in terms of that demographic information based on wards. That demographic information tells us quite a lot about the needs of our communities. What we're trying to do is identify what strengths exist. It's that social, the physical assets that exist within communities that enable communities themselves to respond to their needs. But then that also helps to identify opportunities to be able to build on some of those existing strengths. And I think we know if you take a strengths-based approach, if you build on what works well, there's more opportunity to be able to respond to some of the challenges that exist than if we focus just on where deficits or needs might be. And the purpose of this is about seeking to enable communities. It responds to recently adopted Strengthening Community Strategy, which is about recognising how well communities already respond to some of their own challenges and seeking to enable them to do more for themselves, and looking at opportunities for us to collaborate with partners to be able to respond to what happens in communities and work with them. So just to, in terms of the approach that's been put forward, there's a couple of drafts for you to look at. They're very early drafts. Just to caveat it, there probably will be some slight errors in it because we've gathered it from some of our own information. Some of it might be slightly out of date, but then there's also been a desk-based research, but it hasn't had any other stakeholder or internal team engagement. And I think, as Councillor Golding said about the Green Team and what can come from our climate team, you know, there's an awful lot of information that is already held internally amongst teams. The intention is to do an engagement exercise with some of our internal teams to gather what we've already got. So to try not to replicate what already exists, and then to have conversations with ward members and also with partners. And it's likely, we think, and we've spoken, Councillor Slimmer, haven't we, about town and parish councils and the role that they play, and it's going to vary across the borough in terms of who those stakeholders might be. And that's why we'd be seeking to speak to ward members about, you know, is there anyone else we need to speak to, and if so, who, or as with Councillor Riser has spoken to the chair of the parish council to gather some more information. So it's kind of a flexibility to it in terms of that approach. So basically, we just wanted to get your comments on these draft examples, whether you think this is something that has value in progressing, and if so, whether this approach is something that you would be supportive of, and how you would want to be engaged going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam and Councillor Mackay. Shall we start with if there are any questions for either Councillor Mackay or Sam first, and then we'll go into debate and then come up with some solutions. Obviously, in the meantime, if you want to intervene, I'm sure that's fine. Anybody particularly got a question for the Office of...
Thank you, Chair. One aspect of community that I haven't seen in these profiles or in the ward profiles is crime statistics. I don't know if that's the sort of information that wants to be included, or that you want to include at some point that just isn't there, or if I've just missed it. But I don't know if you've got a comment.
It hasn't got a specific section, but it's part of other information. So another part of my team is Safe Communities team. So we've got an analyst in that team who looks like crime data, and we break it down to ward level. So we absolutely intend to include a summary of what we know about the crime and antisocial behaviour of each area, because that's, you say, part of that picture. So yeah, definitely.
Councillor Vaux has asked a question.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Sam. Just a couple of sort of processy things, really. One is, how are you going to define a community? Because going on wards would, I think, necessarily rather blur some very important characteristics. So presumably you're going to have more than, we've got 54 wards, I can't remember how many we've got in there, 18 wards, or 54 councils or something, yes, that's right. So how many community profiles are you actually going to do? And then is it really going to take 2 years to do it if it's fairly basic information, which is what's here? I think, you know, that seems quite a long time. Thanks.
So in terms of number of profiles, the original intention was 18, but as you can see with the Evangel one, once you start the work, the reality is there are multiple different communities within some wards, particularly where you've got multiple parishes. So there are going to be some areas that are probably going to need more, and then with a summary for the ward, but it's likely, because they're small parish areas, the amount of information that will need to be gathered is less for each of those individual profiles. So there is an element of having to work it through and see how it's going to go. In terms of the 2 years, it may be less. So for these first couple of profiles, it's been difficult to be able to do any time recording around it, because a lot of it has been about developing what the process is, what type of information to include. The intention is, if we do go forward with it, that the first few that we try will do some time recording so that we can get a clearer understanding of how much will actually be involved in it. The other element is that it's intended to be a rolling programme of updates, so we would need to identify which areas we'd want to focus on first. There's likely to be some priority areas to focus on, and then bring others forward, and then we'd seek to, over a 2 year period, keep those updated. What we will be asking internal teams to do is providing them an electronic copy that they can update. So if there are updates to provide sooner, that's something that could be included if something's changed in the interim period that's quite significant.
If I could just ask then, when you've given some thought to communities, because I mean some of our wards, it's clear that there are lots of distinct communities. I mean, Chinham is not. I mean, Chinham is pretty homogeneous, so fine. But there are others, like I think, is it Rooksdown and Campshot or others, you know, where we really, really do need to be very clear about splitting them up. So it would be fantastic if you could bring some kind of schedule back to CEP at some point with when you expect to be able to deliver these. Thanks very much.
Yeah, just like to say that I've got a bit of a background in project management, and once something goes live, I like clear responsibilities and things to be time bound. So I'd reflect that back. Also share very briefly just my thoughts on what is a community, or how many are there in Basingstoke and Deane as a borough. I think of them communities as networks, and there's thousands of them. They're all overlapping. And yes, it's simplistic just to look at a geographical area, but given the knowledge bases that the ward councillors in particular present as an opportunity, I think it probably is the best way forward. I haven't heard a better option than boiling it down to 18 wards, but take the point that in the real world it's far more complex. Thank you.
Councillor Golding.
Thank you. Yeah, just to follow up on that point, I mean, Oakley's very, very different to Ellisfield, for example. So I think that we would probably need a few sub-categories anyway. So on to my question. I have a couple, if I may. In terms of the opportunities, that's where I feel like that's for me is the kind of crux of the document, but is also where it feels lightest on both of the examples we have there. Is that sort of what you see as a final thing, or how would you plan to develop that further?
That's actually been the most challenging bit to develop. And I think some of that's going to have to come from some of the engagement that comes out of it, because it almost needs to act as a bit of a summary of this is all the things that we have identified. This is the demographic of the area, and almost there's so there are opportunities that are essentially gaps. That if there is an organisation that's seeking to extend what they're doing, that's an opportunity to be able to use an evidence base to access funding to do it. And sort of with working with community and voluntary sector, as many of you do here as well, is where they are seeking to extend services or do something slightly different, but having the evidence base to be able to support that, so that actually that is something that there's a gap, there's a demographic, but there's no other services to respond to that, is where those opportunities I think exist. So I think some of that should hopefully get fleshed out through some of that wider engagement and conversations with ward members around what we know about those areas and other teams and partners.
I think in principle they're great documents. I do believe this geographic thing is a bit of a difficult area, because where we are, we serve only 3 parish councils, but I imagine Council Isaac's got a few more than that. But we have got 2 defined communities. Whitchurch and Overton are considered as large community centres in our local plan, and I think they're very defined. So I like the document. I like the fact that we recognise where the voluntary efforts come from residents. I think that's a great thing, and only ward members and parish councils can help you build that. Because the only thing I would nitpick on, and it's quite important to residents, is if whoever's compiling these documents, if you say an area is well served for health facilities with a GP and a dentist, I think residents might tend to disagree sometimes.
I think we've got Councillor Golding again. Thank you.
Thank you. Is this your final format, or is this like a thing that's going to go through comms to jazz it all up and look a bit lovely?
Well, I hope so, if they agree to.
Well, I would like them to.
No.
Thank you. There was a question. So you, Councillor Lee?
Thank you, Chair. Just one on. It talks about increasingly partner organisations, including the RCB and HCC, are seeking to understand and work more closely with communities. One thing that I noted, you have information about the community centres that are there. I just think it'd be worth as part of that, noting what rooms are available so that they can then say, well, actually, we can provide some outreach support within those rooms because they're suitable sizes or they come with the right equipment or whatnot. If that can be considered.
Yeah, we can have a look at that. What we and that can be some of the conversation we can have with some of the community associations and organisations that run those. But what we were trying to avoid is going down the road of getting too much detail in terms of what services are when or things like that. But actually, the scale of that facility and what it's got available could be something we could look at as part of it.
I think a point to make there is that the document may end up signposting you to that level of detail. Otherwise, there's a danger that this could become an industry in itself, creating the documents and maintaining them. Whereas what it's really about is the benefit that the community can derive from the availability of the information. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think if I've got one last question. Any? No. Can we move then on talking about whether we want to make comments on the general way of moving forward, whether we agree with that? Councillor Isaac, sorry.
Thank you. Yeah. So the report's familiar to me. So not surprisingly, I generally support the approach, and I think it can be a very effective tool when it's sort of developed sufficiently. The sort of happy coincidence that one of the profiles, pilot profiles, is a parish in my ward, and if you'll allow me, I think there might be some sort of helpful observations from that, because Etchinswell, North Sidbinton and Bishop's Green does include Bishop's Green, which is an unusual community in that it is it's an isolated rural community with quite high levels of deprivation. There's lots of strengths associated with it, and the thrust of the approach here is that we want to make our communities as sort of self-sufficient as possible, which is something I totally support. But I think we do have to have an awareness that there are occasions when the borough has to provide a helping hand and to encourage the development of volunteers where those volunteers are not currently present, and that's the case in point in Bishop's Green, because we've got a community centre there, which is a modern building. It's owned by the borough council, but it's barely used, and that's because there just aren't the volunteers, people with the right skill sets, and at the moment, with the help of the parish council and Vivid and the Greenham Trust, we are trying at the moment to see what we can do to bring on board to get the funding for a part-time centre manager. And the borough is not it's unclear at the moment where the borough sits on that, because we're quite good as a borough in terms of providing grants for capital projects, but when it comes to revenue expenditure, it's more difficult. And so I pass on to the portfolio holders some of the experiences that I've had in connection with this, but it is something that where I do think we have a role to play to step in and help build that resilience and that self-sufficiency amongst some of these communities where it doesn't always exist. A lot of other communities, they run themselves very happily, but there are other communities where there aren't those volunteers that are ready to hand.
Thank you, Councillor Isaac. I think we will sympathise with your dilemma, because most of us who live out in the communities know very well. I think Councillor Mackay would like to comment.
Well, not to comment, just to say, please, let's meet at Bishop's Green and acquaint me with a bit more of the detail, and thank you.
And next, Councillor Golding. Thank you.
I feel very chatty this evening. So I think it's probably clear that overall I support the approach. I would just ask that when you're making your timeline that you approach ward councillors at that point, so that we can kind of chat to you through what we would see as individual areas. Otherwise you might we might be asking you to make a lot of changes, which would be unfortunate. I would, for the sake of the minutes, just ask that you do include a green section, because I think that's really, really key to help identify areas for development opportunities, not just for the council, but also for people outside of the council looking at it. And hopefully we can get some external funding to support projects and things that way. And I've kind of already said it in my question, but I would definitely welcome it if there were further development for the opportunities and the needs section, because I think that's where it gets most powerful and most useful.
Councillor Compton-Bennett, thank you.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for getting all this information together. I think it's so important for us to understand the residents and the places where they live. And so this is really helpful to get a good overview of the assets and the strengths. It would be wonderful also to see more about the needs. When I was looking through the place-based approach that some of your colleagues put together in the past, I think it was Kieran, and they had some really good ideas about how to identify the needs. And it's then that you'll be able to identify the opportunities, because obviously you'll be meeting those needs. And one thing that's come through again and again is that there are lots of different organisations in our borough that are trying to do exactly this. They're trying to understand our community better and to work out how to meet their needs. And I would particularly highlight the health sector, because I know that in the hospital they've got the public health management group, which I think you've been involved with, and they're using the ABCD model. They've been looking at Popley and I think one other place already, because they know that the GPs and the hospital can't do everything, and so they know that they need to understand what are the needs and then try and bring the voluntary sector in to support them. So I think that it's really important that we as the council work with the health sector, that we work with the voluntary communities to do all of this work and tap into the things that they've already been doing. And one thing that the Fuller Stocktake, which was a massive review in the NHS, they were saying, how can we work the NHS going forward? They said it's absolutely critical that at neighbourhood level, so at sort of ward level, we bring groups, partners together to work on problems together, not just identifying what it is, but then getting the solution, implementing the solution, reviewing. And so I would just urge us that this isn't the end, but in many ways it's the beginning. And it would be great to see a plan for what we do next with this great work.
Yeah, thank you for that. Just on the health one, I think we see our health partners as being quite significant in this, both in terms of what they might do with the information, but also what they can input to it, and some of that around health needs as a factor and things like health outcomes is really useful as part of that. So I think that's data we'd be asking for from them.
Sorry, can I just do a follow-up? I think it's not just data we need. I think we need to work with them. I think we need to have proper groups and work with them regularly so that we're all working together, because we're all trying to achieve the same thing.
Oh, sorry.
We did used to, in the long distant past, have groups where we brought together people from health and social and everything else to discuss that. It might be a task and finish group or something like that might be useful to support this in the future, obviously when we get a bit further down the line, but that might be an idea. Anyone else want to speak? Do you want to come back on that one, Phil?
I think there's just some elements around health that sit in another service, so I probably can't comment fully on that. But
from my point of view, I did have a pre-meet yesterday, and I did mention the fact that, as Sam alluded to, that the town and parishes, where we have parishes, is obviously going to be quite an important area. I do recognise that the two examples are great. One is obviously in the town, and one is out in the rural community. And obviously our towns do not have parishes. the town centre, that is not parished. Obviously, places like Brookstown and Chinham are up on the outskirts, but the centre. So there may be more challenges for ward members in those areas than perhaps is recognised at the moment. So obviously, everybody's got to play their part. But I think the consensus is that this appears to be the way forward. Anyone not agreeing with that we move forward to the next chance and expect a report back on the next wards that you're going to choose, I understand. Anyone got any other views on that? No? Councillor?
So we did talk about a schedule, just to remember for the minutes. Thank you.
We accept you're moving in the right direction and look forward to hearing the report and knowing what your next priority is. It is going to be an awful lot of work, and I think obviously you discovered that when you started. I think I know it's got delayed by COVID and everything else, but I'm sure that we're now going to move forward with that very rapidly, because I'm sure that as part of health and well-being, you know, it's very important. We've got an awful lot of groups out there who are struggling with mental health and other things, and it needs to be identified whether we can support groups out in the rural areas as well in the town. Fine. Thank you. Thank you very much both for coming and attending, and thank you for your report. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on. In fact, we've obviously removed item 9, so we're on item 10. And this is the work programme for the next year or so. The committee needs to be advised that the GIS strategy, which you asked for some time ago, will be brought to the July meeting, so that is already on the cards for July. You need to agree what is already on the programme, which you've got in your papers, and items are being suggested. Obviously, you can bring forward any items. Don't forget, for the work programme, there is a form that's available for you and able to bring any item forward to this committee to be discussed, and whether in timetable. And I would also ask the committee to note that there is a work programme view to receive updates from the lead members and task and finish groups as well, and that the work programme, as per the way scrutiny is working, is that there will be a meeting next week, I think Tuesday the 20th, where the committee chairs and others will be looking at the work programme for the future. So some of the things might be added to anyway. Has anyone got any views on the work programme as it is, and any suggestions of things they might like to see?
Thank you. Right at the end of the last administration, we started talking about the variety of strategies and policies and plans and things that related to our committee, some of which we don't do so much anymore, in that you know, things like the place shaping was in March 2020, and it was great, but now it's excellent that we're reviewing it, and there are probably a whole load more frameworks and strategies that we should do the same too. And I think that Tom mentioned that the council was looking at all the different plans and strategies, etc., and how they all link together and how they then link into the council plan. So it would be wonderful to know when we as a committee will be able to review the policies and things that relate to us.
Can you answer that?
I guess the answer is, again, it will form part of the meeting we have in a week or so's time, when some of the scheduled sort of items which we know are going to come to this committee this year, when we can start to sort of build that into the work programme for the year ahead. So there are certainly strategies that will be reviewed and updated this year, which are not currently on this list. So there is certainly an intention that they will come to this committee as and when they need to be updated, and for your comments and views.
Yes, please. It would be wonderful to have a list of them, like a list of all the strategies and policies, etc., that relate to the group, because that way we know that we're doing a proper, full, methodical job.
One is under development. So yes, I'm sure we'll share that with you in the fullness of time.
Thank you. Any other suggestions, things, Councillor Vogt?
Thanks. Tom won't be surprised that I would like to add into the mix, if it's not already there, which I'm sure it is, the aquadrome, the leisure park, and the LRNA. I would expect to see. I thought they would be on the forward agenda for CEP already, so I'll put them into the mix.
I am sure that they will be raised because, of course, they were discussed at length in previous meetings before the administration changed, and I'm sure that will be brought forward next week. I think you'd be aware that there are a number of people who've got quite a lot of interest in those matters, as well as lots of other things going on in the whole of the borough. I'm sure next week's meeting will bring forward some views that people have, and obviously, as I said, if any councillor is willing to put their information forward on the form, you know, we will look at that and see whether we can bring that to this committee, if that's a relevant place for it to be brought. So please feel free to do so. Anyone? No? Okay. Right. Well, in that case, I think we've actually got to the end of the meeting. So thank you all for your time and your patience with me, with my eyesight. I will get better. I don't know how, perhaps you'll all have to wear a special hat so I can tell who you are or something. But thank you very much, and I'll see you all again at the next committee meeting.